Welcome to the Wednesday, July 16th, 2025 electronic meeting of the Ann Arbor Transportation Commission. This meeting will be held electronically, but we intend to conduct it similarly to an in-person meeting. Public comments will be via telephone or Zoom only. To speak during public comment opportunities, please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID number 934-6385-2907 or join via the Zoom link. This information is also available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN. Chris, if you now call roll, please.
Yeah, not a problem. Before we start, I did receive regrets from Commissioner Hutchinson and Lee, who will unfortunately not be able to attend this evening. Please say here and from where you're dialing when your name is called. Councilmember Ackman,
Here, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Conway, Commissioner Flewellen, okay, Commissioner Automaki,
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hook,
I'm here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Jacobson,
Here, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Keeler, okay, Commissioner Lee is absent. Commissioner Carpenter,
Hey, Christopher, I see Larry and Kate are both in the attendees portion, so
okay, here,
bring them
let
over.
me, of course.
Larry Keeler here, Ann Arbor.
Thank you, Larry. Commissioner Flewellen.
Sorry about that, here from Ann Arbor.
Okay, not a problem. Let me just make a note of that. Okay, Commissioner Carpenter is absent. Commissioner Zekar,
Here, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hutchinson is absent. Commissioner Redinger,
Here from Ann Arbor.
okay. Lieutenant Mike Sherba,
Here from Tyrone Township.
let the record show Commissioner Margolis and Commissioner Stupka are absent. With that, we do have quorum.
And it looks like April is here as well. I'm not sure if she joined after.
Okay, for the sake of consistency, Commissioner Conway.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you. There are two items tonight on the consent agenda, approval of the agenda and approval of the minutes from June. Are there any modifications to any of the other of the items on the consent agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Moved by Eric, seconded by Rachel. All those in favor, please say yes or raise your hand.
Aye, yes.
All those opposed, please say no, raise your hand. Consent agenda is approved. Next up is the public comment portion. This is an opportunity for people to speak for up to 3 minutes. Again, please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID number 934-6385-2907 or connect via Zoom as described on the agenda. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number or your Zoom ID. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone or select the raise hand button in Zoom. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area, mute any television or background sound so that we can hear you clearly. Chris, do we have anybody who would like to speak?
Yes, I am seeing one raised hand. Adam Goodman. Just a quick heads up. I'll give you a 30-second heads up when your time is almost up. The floor is yours.
Hi there. This is Adam Goodman speaking to you from the Fifth Ward. I saw that crosswalk design guidelines were on the agenda tonight, so I wanted to say a couple things about that. First of all, huge thank you to everyone who was involved in installing and getting, the forever process that it took to get MDOT to approve installing the crosswalks on Jackson Avenue. I think these crosswalks are actually what good looks like. And they were sorely needed in this part of town for a very long time, and now they're here and they're beautiful. But on the guidelines, sort of more broadly, I do remember there was a discussion at this commission a year or two ago about this, and I sort of found what was being presented a, a little bit lacking compared to what I think would be ideal. And so I kind of want to suggest a principle in thinking about this, which is that I believe a pedestrian should not have to cross more than 2 consecutive car lanes ever. So if we have a 3-lane road like Jackson with, one travel lane in each direction and a center turn lane, then there should be a refuge island in the center turn lane. If we have a 5-lane road, same thing. There should be a refuge island. It's even more important there. And we do have some crosswalks on like Fuller and Stadium that are just painted lines across 5 lanes of traffic. That seems unacceptable to me. And of course, if we have a 4-lane road, well, that probably needs a lane reconfiguration. So that's the idea that I want to present for your consideration, and I look forward to the discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other people that wish to speak?
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else.
All right. Thank you for anyone who spoke, or I don't think there were actually any emails in our packet, but I always encourage people to email the commission or call in to speak every month. All right. First item, actually, there are no business items scheduled for this meeting, so nothing that we'll be voting on. For information and discussion, we have one topic, the crosswalk design guidelines and mapping review. Cynthia Redinger will, I think, present some materials to us, and then we can have a discussion afterwards. So Cynthia, I think the floor is yours.
All right, I'm just getting myself settled here. So we're going to go ahead and share the slideshow. So if I can get confirmation that everyone can see this.
Looks good.
Great. Always nervous that I'm not sharing the actual presentation and I'm sharing the other slides background. Anyways, thank you to the commission for asking to cover this topic again. As you know, we do like to make sure that we can do a refresher on certain items, especially as we do have changeover in some of our commissioners, and we want to make sure that everybody has a good working knowledge of some of our processes. So tonight we're going to be talking about crosswalk design, and we are this. For those of you who were around for the last presentation that I did on this topic, I will upfront admit that is very similar. So what we're going to be talking about tonight is why we have crosswalk design guidelines and a little bit about how those guidelines were developed. Some information about like what new information is available that we're using as part of our design process that may not be documented in that guidelines document. And also how we're implementing the information that we have and how we utilize that in everyday design. So first off, why did we develop the crosswalk design guidelines? And this slide reads, why develop crosswalk design guidelines? And it shows a process figure that has 3 things leading into that process, and those all read as best practices, context sensitive design, and consistency in the output of that process was desired to be improved access and safety. So for those of you who may not have been around at the time, developing these crosswalk design guidelines was a recommendation that was part of the Pedestrian Safety and Access Task Force final report back in 2015. So we've been using these guidelines for a while now. I wanted to put that date in a little bit of context for everyone. So our next slide reads timeline, and it shows a timeline that has both dates and events. And so we're starting at 2007 when that first non-motorized plan was developed by the city of Ann Arbor. Our second significant date was 2013 when the city updated that non-motorized plan. Our next significant date was 2015, and that is when the Pedestrian Safety and Access Task Force final report came out. And for anyone who might not know, this was a task force of community volunteers that looked at how pedestrians were moving throughout the city and different policies, procedures, guidelines that could be changed and implemented throughout the city to really improve transportation, particularly for non-motorized individuals. And this commission was one of the recommendations of that final report, as well as the crosswalk design guidelines. So in 2016, which is our next significant date, the crosswalk design guidelines were completed and published. In 2017, this commission had its first meeting. In 2018, the Federal Highway, and that's the FHWA stands for Federal Highway Administration. So the FHWA guide for improving pedestrian safety at uncontrolled crossing locations came out. And that's a really significant piece of research findings and guidance that came out of Federal Highway Administration that we use routinely, and I'll cover a little bit more in detail later in this presentation. And then our next significant date is 2020, when the carbon neutrality plan, E20, was published and adopted. Of course, the significance for us is that we do have policy indicating that we need to reduce vehicle miles traveled and create mode shift to non-motorized modes. And then 2021 being our next really significant date, which is when the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, Ann Arbor Moving Together, which is our Vision Zero transportation plan, was adopted as policy. So looking at the guidelines in a little bit more detail, how were these guidelines developed? And we started with a review of the available research, all the research that was available at the time. We did a review of peer city practices. We did a review of national best practices, and we worked with the community. We had several rounds of community engagement to discuss how we were going to develop these crosswalk design guidelines. And there's at least one individual in the room who was there for those public meetings and a valuable source of input. And then we developed our final result, which is the crosswalk design guidelines that are available on our website now. So we started developing the guidelines and working through this process in late 2015. And we did finish up in 2016, and staff immediately began using the guidelines. It was using these guidelines was something that we were immediately applying to our capital projects and Also, we incorporated that into our private development work at the time. So we were reviewing crosswalks in the vicinity and being proposed by private development against these guidelines. So our next slide shows the sort of that first step in the crosswalk design guidelines, and this is a flow chart. And as such, it's going to take a little bit to describe, so I hope everyone is patient with me. We start out with a location that has been determined acceptable by the city. We have never included, when we decide crosswalks, as part of the crosswalk design guidelines, because we do see that as being a little bit separate. There's a lot that goes into whether a crosswalk makes sense in a location, particularly if it's a mid-block location. Some of the things that we consider when we're making those determinations are things like sight lines. Is there clear sight between a motorist and a non-motorized user who's going to be crossing the street? Do we have demand in that area? Is the land use in the area changing that's going to create new demand? Do we have a nearby desire line that maybe could be more safely served in this area? And then once we have made the determination that we're going to be installing or upgrading a crosswalk, then we look at whether it's a controlled or an uncontrolled location. There are separate processes for controlled locations and uncontrolled locations. So to give you a little bit of background, what a controlled location is: a location that has some sort of traffic control device, like a stop sign or an always stop controlled intersection. It could be a signalized intersection. It could be a yield sign at a roundabout. Then uncontrolled locations are locations that do not have that type of control. So those can be at mid-block locations or at intersections between a major street and a more minor side street where there's only control on the side street. So what the slide also reads, that these guidelines focus on the volume of the motorists and the volume of pedestrians, motorist speed, street design or width, conflict between travelers like non-motorized and motorized travelers, potential gaps that are available to people who are crossing the street. And these are the things that really go into the NCHRP 562 worksheet and that output and understanding. At the time, we were really using it to help us understand what that conflict looked like and what some design recommendations would be. This process, both for controlled and uncontrolled, emphasizes crash history, and it emphasizes designated school crossings. And I also have listed here the link for the crosswalk design guidelines on our website. This flowchart leads you to one of three categories. So this is a standard design option category, which is shown here as green, and applied, or applying a standard plus design, which is sort of that middle category and is shown here in yellow. And then we have our high risk design options that are shown here in red. These three different categories correspond to the categories that are shown in the next two sheets of the guidelines. And so this next slide is showing these categories for the uncontrolled design options. And the slide reads that the uncontrolled crossings focus on our street type, our crossing category, which is that standard plus for high risk location. So the streets are really broken down by the type of street they are, which is also known as the National Functional Classification of the street. So we have local streets, collector streets, minor and major arterials that are up to 3 lanes, minor and major arterials that are greater than 3 lanes. And as you'll see, there are different devices listed in each of these categories. For instance, a local street, which you think about like could be a neighborhood street. The standard is an unmarked location. And then a standard plus would be having pavement markings at a high risk location for these really low volume, low speed roads, or really looking at high visibility markings, having warning signs, having a school series warning sign. If the location is a school designated crosswalk location, we always design up. So we're going to select a higher level of design for that location. Something else that shows these differences a little bit in how things may be chosen within those categories is looking at our minor and major arterials up to 3 lanes. And, so that standard is high visibility markings. But that might be a location that's really only a 2-lane location. And then if we go to a standard plus, we're going to add in things from that category. And then the high risk locations, we're continuing to add in devices. When we look at our controlled locations, the crosswalk design guidelines are really focusing more on the control type and also the crossing categories of standard, standard plus, and high risk locations. When we're talking about control types, as I referenced before, it could be a stop control location, it could be a signalized location, and then, or a roundabout location. And once again, those items are accumulating from left to right. So our slide shows those options and reads the items that I mentioned before. Moving on to our next slide, it's really starting to look at what are the things that further enhance, how we're applying design. And I really wanted to touch on updates and research. This slide reads FHWA Guide for Improving Pedestrian Safety at Uncontrolled Locations. And this is that document I referenced earlier in the timeline. Some of the differences in how this document works is that it really emphasizes speed and vehicular volumes. It differentiates different design recommendations based on roadway configuration. It also differentiates different design recommendations based on speed and vehicle volume. And it provides, 3 levels of options for a location. So the graphic that is shown here comes from the FHWA guide, and this is sort of the table that's of the big document. This is the cheat sheet table, right? So we have a list of road configurations, which is 2 lanes, 1 in each direction, 3 lanes with a raised median, 1 lane in each direction. So that could be like a pedestrian refuge island, or a more continuous sort of median. 3 lanes without a raised median, 4+ lanes with a raised median, and 4+ lanes without that raised median. It also shows that we have 3 different vehicle volume categories. So that's under 9,000, from 9,000 to 15,000, and then greater than 15,000. And for each of those vehicle volume categories, we have a breakdown by speed. So it's under and up to 30 miles per hour, 35 miles per hour, and 40 miles per hour or greater. One of the things that this graphic also shows is that there are items that are, if just the number is listed, that means that the countermeasure is a candidate for this location. If the item is in a black circle, that signifies that that countermeasure should always be part of these designs. And if the item has an undarkened circle around it, then that's something that should always occur in conjunction with other things. So you shouldn't put that item in without other things, and which can help you understand those items. And then all of those numbered countermeasures are also as part of this graphic. And so that really makes it a little bit easier as a designer to quickly check your design against what these recommendations are. One thing I really want to point out is that unlike the research that we based our guidelines on, this research output does not consider pedestrian volumes. So it doesn't consider how many pedestrians are crossing, because if any level of pedestrian activity is occurring in these circumstances, these are the recommended design features. How we currently use this particular research is that when we are evaluating a location for a new design, we will evaluate it based on our crosswalk design guidelines first, and then we cross-reference it against these design features. And this is once again for those uncontrolled locations. And then whichever analysis comes up with the higher level of design, so the more protective design, that's the design that we implement. So our next slide is really getting into how does staff use the guidelines, and that's what it reads. And it just shows a picture of Fifth Ave when the Carytown project was new and we did those crosswalk improvements in coordination with the DDA. So how are we using these guidelines? And I talked a little bit about how we go through the actual nitty-gritty of the analysis, but I wanted to point out that we're really using, we use these guidelines as part of our 8 program areas and that are listed in the plan. And as listed here, they are behavior change, the speed management program, street reconfiguration road diet program, the street reconfiguration other, which generally is applying to like intersections, our quick build program, our capital investment program, not so much messaging campaigns, although like the work that we're doing this evening is helping to message and educate about these devices and why we pick the designs that we do. So the messaging and the education is not as focused. We really are focusing on, the design elements. So the street design and reconfiguration, our quick build, our capital investments. But these guidelines and these practices do inform these other project areas. And some of our speed management principles are directly related to crosswalk design and how we're designing crosswalks. Our next slide is still about our strategies and just thinking through all of the work we do together. So it reads our strategies. We all need to work together. Successful strategy takes all of our E's, and those are listed here in this graphic as evaluation, education, encouragement, equity, enforcement, and engineering. And I just want to remind everyone that our key mobility strategy number 5 from Ann Arbor Moving Together is enhanced safety and visibility at uncontrolled crossings. So at this point in time, I wanted to go ahead and have an opportunity for any questions that anyone might have. I do have an image here that is the State and North University intersection. And I included this because intersection and crosswalk design is constantly evolving, and this image really helps me remember that, and that we did so much work and we put so much work into this intersection, the DDA, city staff, our consulting teams, and just really trying to understand everyone's needs and have the best design we possibly could. This has been in for a couple of years now. And ProAg just came out, which is the public right-of-way guidelines for how we provide accessibility in the public space. And there are things that we would do differently in this design now with that ProAg coming out and understanding more about truncated domes as tactile information and tactile delineation tiles as tactile, longitudinal delineation. And so we're always trying to get it right the first time, but sometimes we just need to keep evolving our practice, and that's something that we're always engaged in. So I did want to go ahead and take some time to answer any questions that anyone has.
Yeah, Rachel.
Thanks so much, Cynthia. Your presentations are always so informative and clear. I would love to hear you talk a little bit about like how you think about the principle of harm mitigation, and in particular as it intersects with this sort of principle that I'm hearing around designing up, especially in places where you have vulnerable users, like around school zones, for example. And I think part of my question is a little bit more in the deciding to put in a crosswalk phase that's outside of the scope of this. But yeah, I mean, we know that people are crossing without infrastructure all the time in many places. And we also know that designing up is more expensive, and I assume could prohibit a project, make a project take longer or potentially prohibit it from moving forward in some circumstances. Maybe that's a false assumption. I don't know. And I come back to this principle of harm mitigation, where putting in any infrastructure could be supportive in a lot of circumstances, even if it's not, getting us to our ideal design guideline implementation.
Yeah, and I just want to confirm that I heard this correctly. You said harm mitigation as in HARM. Okay, great. Yeah. The first time you said it, I didn't catch it, so I was very grateful that you said it again later in your question. I think that is a really great thing to discuss, because there are always trade-offs, right? We talk about this internally in that part of the design process is doing your best to make sure you identify the things that you may not have originally known as part of where you start with design, and then looking at all the discrete elements and understanding, what are the pros and cons of each of those design elements, and what are the trade-offs that they might involve, because frequently there are trade-offs, and that is a lot of what we're doing when we're going through design. So we are, one of those sort of design up features that is not as costly that we do is, if we are installing a crosswalk, most of the time it's going in as a high visibility crosswalk anymore. So even if it may have been in the original crosswalk design guidelines, something that would have been a more standard crosswalk location, one of the things that we decided internally was that it's the cost differential is very minimal. And that's an area where we can say, if it's worth marking, it's worth marking in high vis. So most of everything that we're putting in now is going in high vis. So that's one of those sort of low cost trade-offs that it's easy to make. Someplace where it might be a much higher cost trade-off is when you have a location that is a smaller location. And I'm thinking of Stone School and Birch Hollow, which is an enhancement that we recently installed. And there were crosswalks on both sides of that intersection crossing Stone School. So part of what we were looking at was we really wanted to bring those up to having our RFBs, so pedestrian activated warning devices, because the speeds out there are a little bit higher than we would like. And so we wanted to have that device that was going to better grab a motorist's attention that someone was crossing the street. And it's a smaller intersection, and then we have to go through that kind of design decision of, do we keep both of the crosswalks and install 4 back-to-back RRP units, or do we consolidate the crossings and be able to get more work done in a year? And in that case, like that intersection, we looked at that intersection. We used what we had available to kind of understand what the demands were by pedestrians on both of those crosswalks. And we decided that we were going to consolidate crosswalks because one of them had better sight distance than the other one. And then we could reduce the overall spend for that intersection, but get that higher level of design and still be able to do more work in a year. So I think that's some of what you're thinking about. Really, the big cost jump goes from, it's not pavement markings, it's not signs, although when you do a lot of them, that does get costly, but it's when you're looking at when you have to make changes to concrete and when you're installing steel and signalized infrastructure. That's when the costs really jump. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that definitely started to answer it. Oh, I see that did I freeze? Am I back? Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think that starts to answer it. And I think I just want to like clarify kind of what I mean by harm mitigation also, which is like, maybe a broader conversation in this genre around like when we're making decisions about where to install crosswalks and what design guidelines to use, like when are we thinking about, or like yeah, when do we choose to simply mitigate harm when we know that a lot of people are crossing unsafely? Like I feel like this presentation and conversation, we focused more on how to optimize, which by all means, like that's great. And there's like another part of the conversation, which is like how to get those almost like low-hanging fruit, like things that really, even if we could just do something small, it might mitigate a lot of harm. Yeah, so that's just like a piece that we didn't get into quite as much, but your discussion of the trade-offs was super helpful to understand like what does it mean to go to the next level, and what could be the trade-offs and the costs.
Okay, then I will follow that up a little bit. When we're deciding, where are we working at in a given year, we do receive requests for enhancements or for new crosswalks. And frequently those are coming in through the HFixit app. And as that is where the majority of our intake is, we use CityWorks to sort of manage that queue and that, where we house those. We have a layer that we have developed so that when requests come in, we're able to track them, we're able to geo-reference them, and then all of the requests for a particular point in space can get associated with that point in space so that we know how much interest there is in that area. And my favorite resource that everybody gets tired of me talking about is that we do use Strava a lot, and it's a sampling, right? but it's always hard to get good pedestrian data. And as people are volunteering that data for usage, then we're happy to use their data. There's the free version that anyone is available, can sign up for an account and use that version. But then we also have access to a different version that is available to that the company provides free of charge to public employees, so that we can also look at the data a little bit differently. But frankly, the heat map is what we use the heat map a lot. It helps us understand how people are moving through space, both as a pedestrian and as a cyclist. So when we are getting requests or we're starting a design for a new project, then we are looking at, okay, what do we have for pedestrian access right now? What are attractors that are in this corridor that may not be currently served? So if we're looking at something individually as a request and a response, there's a process for that. And then when we're doing capital projects, there's a process for that, where we're looking at, do we have deficiencies that we need to, go ahead and put in some new crosswalk locations. And then we're looking at what we have for requests. We're looking at those attractors. We're having conversations with the ride about how do we serve transit riders, and if we find good locations for crosswalks, can we move transit stops to the crosswalks and make sure that we're serving everyone who's traveling through the network to the best that we can. Did that help?
It did. I would love to know if the queue is publicly available, and if so, yeah, what's like the easiest, or if we could see that at some point. And I
Yeah.
feel like you've shown parts of it, at least in some, when we're talking about project lists.
Mhm.
But yeah, if that would be like a helpful, I think, easy reference for the commission.
Yeah, so we're currently prioritizing the crosswalk requests on an annual basis. So we haven't done it yet this year. It was completed at the beginning of last fiscal year, the last time, and I believe that list was provided to Transportation Commission, and it was also provided to Council, along with a listing of sort of those items that we were working on for last fiscal year and this fiscal year.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, I'm relatively new, so I probably don't have it like bookmarked. But yeah, good to know that it's easy to get.
And real quick, as a follow-up, Cynthia, are the Strava, the heat maps, available at all?
Yeah, there's you have to make an account, but it's a free account.
Oh, you
that
can't
is available
access
to the
what
public.
the same thing that you guys see. It's just everybody that has an account would see the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same data that we see. There are just a couple of extra tools that are available to public employees that are not available. And Strava has a way that you can reach out to them. I mean, if you reached out, it's a form. If you filled out the form and you said, I am a Transportation Commission member for the city of Ann Arbor, they'd probably grant you access. We have individuals in engineering and planning who use that. But to be perfectly honest with you, I probably use the public facing. I definitely use the public facing, more publicly available heat map more than anything.
Okay, thank you. Dharma?
I was gonna kind of piggyback off of Rachel, and I'm not sure if this at all gets at some of what you were asking, but it got me thinking about you mentioned crossings, places that we know that people are crossing, and first thing that came to mind was Plymouth, unfortunately. And I guess my question is like, is there a like minimal standard below which staff would not feel comfortable placing a crosswalk because it might, I don't even know how to put this because they're already crossing there, but to put a crosswalk there that isn't enhanced on a 5 lanes or whatever it is probably not really mitigating harm. So I guess I'm kind of wondering about how that interplay too.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and the simplest answer to that is yes. So I will reference the Jackson Huron crosswalks that just went in, and as part of the crosswalk design process that we went through with them, the westernmost location that's over by Vets Park is it's just to the east of where the two lanes start, right? So you have a 3-lane cross section there, and you have the bike lanes. But I think the one bike lane is starting to drop as you get through there. And that was the location that had the best sight lines. This is the location that we were picking. But MDOT's standards for crosswalks state that if it's 3 lanes and you can put in an island, then you're done. And staff said, we're not comfortable with this. We know that people are driving faster than the speed limit here. We know that we have crash history here. We want our RFPs in this location. And that's something that we aren't willing to budge on. Like, we need to have this design feature here because we want to be able to have a higher level of design here based on volume, based on speed, based on crash history, all of those things. And so that's an example of where we said, no, we have to meet this minimum. I think, Plymouth is really complicated for different reasons, because it's a very short segment between 2 signalized intersections. You have a lot of queuing in that area that is frequently encompassing the majority of the entire segment, depending on time of day. So that is why, with that location, we have started with one of our on-call consultants, and they're performing a slim down road safety audit for us. And so we're starting there and looking at that design, because that design is going to be bigger, it's going to be more complicated. It may involve working with MDOT to get a crossing at the signalized intersection. We don't know where that one is going to go yet, but just plopping.
So it sounds though like what you're saying based on I'm glad that oh, sorry. I think you froze it. I thought you were done.
Oh, no, sorry. Yeah. So it's one of those things where just marking our crosswalk and even putting up our RFBs does not feel good enough. And so we need to understand a little bit better what we need in that location.
Yeah, and perhaps like it's easy to get tripped up on enhanced, because it sounds like what you're clearly saying is that in some cases, for example, it took a long time to get the thing on Jackson. It sounds like from what you're saying, it would not have been acceptable to say, you know what, we could get this much faster if we just did this, and it will be better than the nothing that exists there right now. It sounds like you're saying in staff's assessment, no, it's not really better than the nothing that's there now. It needs to be minimally this. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah, and it's a concept that engineers used to rely on too much, but it's the idea of a pedestrian having an outsized sense of security in using a facility. And ultimately, drivers do need to be responsible for paying attention to their surroundings. But at the same time, there is an acknowledgement of, the human condition. And if you are in an environment where everyone is traveling faster, you do need to be able to either change the design to bring those speeds down, or in the case of Jackson, where we don't have as much design flexibility, to start, like, what are the design elements that we can add on that are going to assist that interaction and help grab that driver's attention.
Right, Pete?
I've got a couple of questions about design guidelines, but since Plymouth has been brought up, I'd like to comment on that too. I've been up there a couple of times since the fatal crash there in March, and every time that I've gone there, someone has crossed Plymouth on foot in the exact same place where we had a pedestrian who was killed there. So that is happening. It happened today, I'm sure, and I'm sure it happens every day. And if we are not able to do something about that right away, then that is a shortcoming of our process and our ability. And it may be that what we need to do is to shut down a lane or slow down Plymouth or do something. But our decision to do nothing is exposing people who use that area and who go to the destinations on either side of Plymouth to risk every day. And I don't know how else to say that. That's just the reality. So that's Plymouth. I guess I'm glad you brought up Birch Hollow also, because that's one of the crosswalks that instigated me to ask for this topic. We added an enhanced crosswalk on one of the legs of the intersection that crosses Stone School, and we erased an existing crosswalk on the other leg. And what I'm hearing from people in that area is that people are still crossing at that intersection on the side that no longer has a crosswalk. So we somehow decided that that one leg should have a enhanced crosswalk and one shouldn't. I would like to know more about what that process is. Because when I look at that area, I see things like in the area, I see a Jewish community center is nearby, and I see lots of residential areas on all sides of that intersection. There's also light industrial nearby. When I look at it, I don't know how to determine which of those destinations is more important for us to be putting the facilities in place for, right? Some people who start at some of those residences and go to some of those destinations are now going to have to make a three-legged crossing to get to them. They're going to have to cross Birch Hollow twice and cross Stone School once. Whereas yesterday, they could get to those same destinations just by crossing Stone School once. So we've made a determination that it's okay for them to have to now do 3 crossings instead of 1. And when I look at these intersections, I don't see an obvious, I don't see anything obvious about the destinations in that area that say that we should have chosen one or the other. So that's one example. I also have the same misgivings about the way that the crosswalk is set up at Burbank and Green, where we had an injury crash this year. One leg of that intersection has RRFB, pedestrian refuge island, and one leg that's crossing Green doesn't. So how do we decide that, the destinations on one side are going to have this better safety equipment than on another? And my sense of that is that that's a decision that needs to come from somehow needs to come from the community, whether that's by way of community meeting or from our elected officials or what, I don't know, but that's not a thing that should be optimized. The community should be making a decision about what level of safety we want, and then the engineering team should be telling us what it takes to achieve that. That's how that process should go, in my opinion. And the analogy that I would give is that we as a community decide what level of risk we're willing to live with when it comes to flooding in a heavy heavy rain event. We make that decision as a community, and then the engineering team determines what it takes to deliver that level of safety and protection from flooding. So that's my feeling on, you know, how we should be making that decision about which portions of intersections get enhanced crosswalks. The other thing I'll add about that, though, is that at Burbank, we still have a crosswalk across Green, even though it has not been enhanced. There are other locations in the city that are like that. And when I went to look at the intersection of Burbank and Green, somebody used the unimproved, you know, a crosswalk that didn't have an RRFB. And in the injury crash at that intersection, the pedestrian was in the unimproved crosswalk. So I feel like we need to be aware of those. We need to be figuring out a solution for them. And if you can't tell, I don't think that just erasing the non-complying crosswalks is the right thing to do. So I know that was a lot, but the main thing I'd like to know is, like, how do we reach that decision about, you know, if we have to choose one, how are we making that decision? And is it really, do we have the right decision-making processes in place? Thank you.
If I can add on to what I said about that decision-making process earlier, I can speak to the Stone School example. I cannot speak to the Burbank example, as that design happened, I think it was like maybe 12 or 14 years ago, and was prior to my joining the city of Ann Arbor. There are a lot of factors that go into that decision, and we never take it lightly, right? Because you are removing access. You are possibly requiring someone to have multiple stages to their crossing. So that is not a decision that we ever take lightly. Frequently in like a neighborhood setting where we end up having to pull a ramp out, that ramp is leading into a driveway. And then that is what is considered to be a technical impossibility to provide ADA access, because your driveway approach cannot ever be a ramp for pedestrian access. So like in those circumstances, that's sort of like one end of when we have to make that decision. The Stone School and Birch Hollow example, as I said previously, it comes down to sight distance. And that was really the thing that we came down to. And then we did look at what the usage in those areas were. And you actually had more usage on one crosswalk than the other. And while we understood that we would be, that there would be some folks who would feel disadvantaged as part of that design. But then when we're looking at, you know, what the sight distance on that vertical curve is, and when we were looking at what the sight distance for someone pulling out of Birch Hollow and you know, the obstruction of the fence, and for someone coming over the hill, and for a pedestrian waiting to be obstructed by the fence and having that sight distance limited, that was really what that one came down to. And that's a technical decision. And so that's like how that decision was made. And
Sure.
frequently there are just a lot of factors that are going into those types of decisions, and those are the lights at City Hall. So you know, we're looking at that. We're also looking at many other factors that encompass design, how people interact with each other, and maybe, you know, one side of an intersection versus another side of an intersection, because you can put you don't have a left turn lane on one side of the intersection, and you can put in an island and not take away that safety benefit of that left turn lane from the motorists as well, because we're always balancing safety needs.
So is it a similar situation at Champaign in that area? We did Champaign and Birch Hollow. We we got rid of existing ramps at Champagne as well.
You know, Champagne came down to consolidating usage and sometimes it is a value engineering decision. In that case, you have very late volumes on the cross street. So
I guess my concern at Birch Hollow is that, like, I don't think people are going to stop crossing there. People who are able to step off of a curb and walk on some grass are, I mean, what I'm hearing is that they're still continuing to use it. So now they're using a crosswalk that has no markings and is also difficult to see because of sightlines. I mean, I'm just not sure that we've solved the problem there by getting rid of that crosswalk. And I guess I'm not hearing that when we don't have a technical exclusion like sightlines, I'm not hearing that we have an established process for determining how to consolidate crosswalks. Like that feels like something that we need some guidance or some community discussion about, in the way that we had community discussion about the guidelines themselves. Thank you.
Eric.
Yeah, I had a question about signalized intersections and pedestrian signals. I've noticed that there's a lot of variation in their behavior around the city. Like when you're downtown, there's no signal press buttons. So they just kind of always, you know, with the traffic, you get the leading pedestrian interval and you go. Some intersections, they have the button, and if you press it, you get a leading pedestrian interval, but if you don't press it, you still get a walk phase. And some signals, like around where I live up on the northeast side, if you don't press that button, you don't get a walk phase. So if you arrive to the signal late and there's a green light for traffic, it'll still have the don't walk, unless you press the button and then you'll wait, 2 cycles to get to it. So I'm curious about that. Just what is the decision-making process as far as like how those buttons work based on where the signal is basically in the city?
I think that one of the first things that we have to acknowledge when we're talking about traffic signals is that our signal infrastructure was developed over time. So you will see a wide variety of best practices of the era that signal was designed. And, so what you see in the downtown is that when those signals were installed, it was the best practice to have pedestrian recall at all times. And you never had push buttons. Best practice right now would not be to install signals even in the downtown in that particular manner. The push buttons are an incredibly important part of delivering audible pedestrian signals to the signal infrastructure. And it is the only reliable way to provide audible pedestrian signals as part of signal infrastructure now. So you will find that as time goes on, we will have pedestrian push buttons eventually at all of our signals, because it is really important for that access piece to have a signal that will announce which direction has the green. And some of that requires major infrastructure changes to those signals in the downtown, because you do need to have a 10-foot spacing between the two push buttons for the different directions as part of the intersection. So rolling that out is a little bit slower because it is very costly. We did implement leading pedestrian intervals across the city for our signals, so that you do have that advantage. When we don't have pedestrian push buttons, then someone who does not have the ability to see that the LPI is on does not have the advantage of the LPI because they don't know that they have the walk signal, as they have not heard the adjacent street start moving. But Larry can describe all that a lot better than I can. So we're working towards, especially like on our cycle tracks, we need to get that information to individuals, and so that is a priority for us that we're starting to work towards getting that implemented. The ability to provide flexibility in a signal to meet the demands that are being placed on it is also another reason that we use the push buttons. So if you're able to go ahead and let the signal know that you're there, whether you're a bike, whether you're a car, whether you're walking as operating as a pedestrian, that allows us to design in a little bit more flexibility into the traffic signal. We do have some locations now. The LPI and recall that you sort of like, the pedestrian interval always coming up. I'm going to have to check in with the shop about that one because I'm actually not sure on that particular design if that was just something maybe funny that happened. But we have locations, especially on our arterial corridors, where we have coordinated timing plans between different intersections. So think about, Washtenaw is one, but that's an MDOT route, so it is a little bit of a different critter. But Stadium, Plymouth, where the signals are working in sequence, where traffic is moving through some of those locations. Also, the three signals of Plymouth, Broadway, Maiden, and Broadway Swift. Those intersections are coordinating and communicating with each other. But particularly on Plymouth, if you have, when we know that during certain times of day, our baseline need for vehicular traffic is going to exceed the walking time across that intersection, that's where we're routinely implementing recall, because we know that the green light is going to be on anyways for the amount of time it would take you to cross the street. And so if we're always servicing a pedestrian interval at a location that doesn't have much traffic. So I'm thinking about State and Eisenhower. And if you're crossing State Street, that is a really long crossing. It's not a very comfortable crossing, but it's a very long crossing. And so if you were trying to cross Eisenhower and we were always servicing the amount of time it would take to walk across State Street, then your delay waiting to cross Eisenhower will always be a lot larger because of that amount of time, where the vehicle traffic may have already cleared and we could shut down that phase of the signal and move it to the other direction to service the pedestrian faster.
Here's a quick follow-up on the first part of your answer, clarifications. Like downtown, best practice currently is to install pedestrian buttons for accessibility reasons, which I understand. But does that imply that the buttons always have to be pushed by everyone, or are they just they're available for people who need them, or do they have to be pushed?
That's a great question, and the answer is No, they do not have to be pushed. So right now at the intersection of State and North U, as part of that design, those signals do have pedestrian recalls. So the pedestrian phases are always coming up. Pedestrians are our number one type of travel through that intersection. And so we're prioritizing that service in that intersection. We're always bringing those up. The audible messaging does not play unless it's been activated.
Okay, so I'll make sure I understood that. Okay, thank you. Rachel.
Yeah, my question is similar. I thought I heard you say that basically, like there's a slow rollout of actually like replacing old signals with the accessible pedestrian signal, and that the way I understood what you were saying is that like the technology is such that ultimately everything will be on a push button, because it'll be the accessible signal. But is it true that technology exists for the auto, like the auditory thing to happen without a button being pushed, for it to just be on, the timed light cycle and for it to come on automatically? And if so, why don't we use that?
So what I said earlier was that this is the most reliable way to provide this
Okay.
service. Yes.
Okay.
But there's also another really important function of that button, and that button has a locator beacon. So when you're in that busy intersection and you're trying to navigate yourself, and once again, Larry can speak to this a lot better than I can, but it helps an individual find the place of crossing and get themselves properly oriented, which is a little bit more difficult, particularly when we talk about this intersection of State and North U, because even though the texture of the pavement changes, what I have heard, especially from the WISD community, is that there's not strong enough tactile messaging with the pavement materials that we use in that curbless area. And based on what I've heard, based on what's in the new ProAg, I would make some different design recommendations for that. But like that, the push button and the plaque associated with the push button are aligned with the crosswalk, so that you can align yourself in physical space to be able to get across that crosswalk. And then you can also hear the locator beacon on the opposite side of the street. So they do serve this really important function for navigating in an urban environment.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks for explaining that. I mean, it's kind of the precursor to my actual concern that I'm hoping you can speak to, which is like I think the biggest issue that I observe with having signals that require a pedestrian to press them is that if you need to cross two major streets in the course of doing your crossing, then you could be waiting at a light for a really long time in order to cross both of those streets. So I think I'm wondering, yeah, and if you arrive at the intersection at an inopportune time in the light cycle, and it requires you to press two buttons that are not close to one another, and you miss it, right? Then you've basically like missed the whole light cycle and you have to start again. And so I'm wondering if there's any way to like lessen that issue with the technology that we are rolling out.
Not right now. There are some manufacturers who are starting to develop signal detection technology that is promising to be able to passively detect pedestrians, but they've been promising that to us for over 10 years, and it hasn't really worked out super well yet. But I think that we are getting closer to a point of being able to have that type of technology. just in general, the way that computing and video analysis is going, and also other forms of detection, such as radar and LiDAR. But we're not there yet. And then even once that is available, you said earlier, oh, there's a slow rollout on signal upgrades. There's always a slow rollout on signal upgrades. Like, we're maintaining that infrastructure every year. So
sure.
there's always equipment that's being replaced. But, this equipment, some of the pieces of a signalized intersection have a 30-year life expectancy. So it's, as you're working through the system, it will take time to make those kind of changes, but those are the kind of changes that we're always on the lookout for technology, and sometimes a manufacturer will come to us with a new technology that they're like, hey, this is really great, and we would like you to test it in your system and let us know what you think of it. And we're willing to engage in those sorts of activities where we'll test other equipment and just like have it sit on top of the equipment that we already have running at an intersection to understand that. We do that sometimes with research, research that U of M is doing, and sometimes just with companies, to be able to find those better solutions that are working well and start implementing those solutions in our system.
Yeah, I guess I think, to close the loop on this, like, I'm wondering and sort of hoping that as we make decisions, going back to like the original setup for this question, which was like, some intersections, the pedestrian signal will come on no matter what. And then I hear you saying that like we can put the auditory signal on top of that. Maybe I am not getting that. Is that, yeah.
Yes,
and
that
I'm
can
just
be a case.
Yeah, and so I'm wondering, like, as we're making decisions about which pedestrian signals are automatic, like, if I'm hoping that we can be more expansive about that. I imagine it has to do with the volume of pedestrians crossing somewhere. And then I want to like be supportive of pedestrians who are frequently crossing somewhere that has a low volume, and what is it actually, and understand what does it even actually cost us to make that an automatic, to make that an automatic signal.
Yeah. And then, I mean, there are also some factors that play into that, like the geometrics of the intersection. So we have some intersections that are really huge. And part of what we're doing with supportive council is we're going through and we're looking at some of these corridors and understanding what's the right size of this intersection. And you may notice that in some locations, so Fuller and Main Lane comes to mind, where the crosswalks are set very far back from the actual intersection proper. And then in those circumstances, when you pull the stop bar so far back, you're actually adding different layers of delay into an intersection because everything is so far out and has such a much longer distance to travel. So something that we as a team are routinely looking for are ways to, reduce that crossing distance for pedestrians, reduce the amount of space that a vehicle has to travel through an intersection. But it's something that we're always working on, but it's hard to see the progress because it does not happen quickly.
Yeah, totally understand that. Thanks.
Larry, I think you got your hand up.
I do. 2 quick points. One is that I use a lot of those push. Of course, like Cynthia said, I use a lot of those a lot, and I find that I wouldn't want to press a button, cross a street, and then hurry up and cross another street without having a minute to sit and make sure my surroundings are correct. For instance, when I cross a street like that, then have to cross another one, I'll press my button, and I'll go over there, and I'm glad I have a few seconds after I press the second button to assess my traffic, I tend to cross about maybe a second or two after I hear the signal that I can cross, because I've noticed that a lot of times it takes a second or so for people to get the it takes a second for traffic to get the idea when I cross. So if that matters, I like to have that little bit of slow down a little bit for a little bit of patience. We just learned that when we use these button signals, we got to have a little patience so we can cross correctly. And an idea for the if eventually an idea for the automatic voice over, I would call it voice over on the normal the ones that don't flash until you press, that if you're in the vicinity, that they will only go off in the vicinity if somebody's standing next to the pole for a second, you get a sensor to go off, because it doesn't always need to be needed. But as soon as you're standing at the pole, a sensor can go off and then let you know. When it's time to cross.
All right, thanks, Larry. Pete.
So what I'm hearing is that there's more than one function that button can do. It can trigger a walk signal, but it can also trigger an auditory indication of which street has the walk signal, right? And the button could do either or both of those functions. Am I right about that?
They can.
Okay. I guess in general, I'm not in favor of adding more buttons for the purpose of giving pedestrians the walk signal. Like I think it's better when intersections get a walk signal every time. Adding them for the purpose of that auditory indication, though, seems like a very good idea. So, but that doesn't mean that we need to limit the walk signal to only when the button is pressed. That's one thing. The other thing is that the situation that Rachel was describing, where you might have to press two buttons to get around an intersection and wait for more than one cycle, that seems to me to be very fixable. Even at intersections where a button press is required to give a walk signal, pressing one walk button could trigger more than one walk signal. It could trigger two walk cycles in a row on two subsequent cycles. Pressing one button could also trigger, trigger a walk signal to cross Huron and a walk signal to cross division in series. And if the pedestrian who pushes the button only needed to cross Huron and didn't need to cross division, then okay, we gave a walk signal to division that wasn't really required. To me, that doesn't seem like a big deal. But it could be a big improvement to the pedestrian experience, because then they don't have to wait through two cycles. Is this idea making sense? And is it something that we could evaluate?
I understand what you're suggesting. I think that something that this commission has heard many times is that we're always balancing priorities between different travelers, and the locations where we are using the activation for all modes of travel, that is at our larger intersections. Often, it could be something that does have a little bit lower levels of non-motorized activity, but we are, when we're choosing to require activation from all of the different modes, that is an efficiency decision, and it is an efficiency for all modes decision when we're looking at that type of an implementation in a traffic signal timing plan. But each location is unique, and we do consider all of those aspects at all of our locations. And with each location being unique, that's That's why we look at them as individuals instead of making sort of blanket decisions.
Okay, I understand that, and I would like to encourage us to come up with solutions that will help us meet our ambitious goals for reducing vehicle miles traveled and increasing pedestrian and bicycle mode share, and giving a little extra to pedestrians in circumstances like what I just described seems like a way to do it without a lot of investment. That would be a change in the signalization and a way that we can make it easier for pedestrians. And I'm not an expert on this, but it looks to me like without too much hardship for drivers who might have to suffer through an extra walk signal. I don't know how much that would slow them down, but I mean, it doesn't seem like it would be much. So this is a thing that I think that we should investigate. So thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, I would just say that my concern mostly with this is with the human factor that we talked about earlier, because I've definitely seen pedestrians come up to a signal where they're arriving a little late to the signal phase, and so they haven't pressed the button, and they see that there's a don't walk signal, but they also see that the parallel traffic has a green light, and they say, well, I should have a walk signal, even though I don't, and so I'm going to cross anyway. But if you're crossing without the cross signal, without the walk signal, you don't get that flashing red hand, you don't get any kind of signal saying, you're almost out of time, or maybe don't start crossing now. So they don't know how long that signal is going to last because all they see is the red hand. And so that's my main concern with these intersections that don't have the automatic pedestrian, because it kind of encourages people to take risks, because some people will wait for the next signal phase and some people won't. And then you could be crossing during conflicting. So that's my main concern. I'm definitely glad that you brought up Fuller and Maiden Lane. I'm sure you're aware there was a crash with a cyclist or a pedestrian recently there, even though it was just reopened to traffic. I cross that intersection more than once a day, and it's a really, really difficult intersection because drivers can't see you crossing because you're so far away from the parallel traffic. So I'm glad that that's being looked at. And I also really wanted to thank whoever was involved with the recent signal changes at Plymouth in Maiden Lane, because I've noticed that there have been a lot of changes with the pedestrian button there and with the behavior of the traffic signal, and they're fantastic now. Like, they are way, way improved of when that intersection was first designed. Now, if you press the traffic button, if you press the pedestrian button, right turning traffic from Maiden Lane gets a red signal. They get like, do not go, and pedestrians have time to cross. And it's so good because that's another intersection where it's really hard for traffic to see pedestrians waiting to cross. So major kudos to staff for redesigning that. It's really, really good. That's it.
To follow on with the first part of Eric's comment, I've always thought it'd be a good idea, even if nobody pushed the button, instead of just showing the solid red hand, even if it goes immediately to a flashing red, give a countdown, even if the countdown is like 9 seconds. That way, there's an indication to the cars traveling parallel that there is a countdown here. There might be pedestrians. Maybe some pedestrians, at least they have an idea of how long they might make different or better choices. If they see that there's only 5 seconds, then they won't choose to step out. Whereas before, they're like, oh, well, it's green, I'm just going to go anyway. I should be able to. I just think that more information would be better. I don't know if there's standards, engineering standards around that, but I don't know. I just feel like I agreed with what Eric was getting at there. Let's see, Rachel.
I just want to underscore the conversation that Peter and Cynthia were having, and really just, I appreciate you naming the elephant in the room, Cynthia and Peter, that like not having automatic pedestrian signals at its core is to make things more convenient for cars. And that is a choice that we're making. And I think it's important that we're really clear about that.
All right, Kate.
So, first of all, apologies if you can hear the jungle noises in the background. That's my son's nightlight, as he tries to go to sleep. But to kind of tie what Pete and Rachel and Eric said together and just kind of amplify that, I do think we should be more expansive in our definition of crossings that qualify for the automatic walk signal. And one thing that seems like low-hanging fruit for that is the traffic, the safety corridors. I'm not using the right terminology that we've looked at before. And I know that some of them are on MDOT highways, but I just think about Packard because I cross there every day. And that is one that a lot of, it's part of a school zone. A lot of children cross that, and it does not have that. And how many times have we talked about Packard here? So it does seem like there could be some maybe more additional automatic triggers that say, okay, whatever the delay to drivers there's going to be, we have this evidence that warrants that delay. So that may already happen, Cynthia. But if it doesn't already, I feel like there again should just be a lower bar for turning that to automatic, and any crashes involving pedestrians or cyclists seems to me to be definitely one of them, as well as inclusion on the crash or safety corridor listing.
As somebody's more than 1,000 times now at like Granger and Wells, like the time to cross if you successfully hit the button versus the time that just the traffic light is green if you don't hit the button. I've never noticed any significant, maybe it's like 2 or 3 seconds. I don't know. I feel like at that point, just make it always, I don't know where the bar is, or it's like, oh, it would be X number of seconds longer if it were always activated. Is that number like 2 seconds or 20 seconds or 10? I don't know, but I don't know. I would consider a reconsideration of that because often like Wells and Packard, like I get there a millisecond too late. I don't get to push the button. That light is green on Wells for like a long time. Like why? So anyway, okay, drove that enough. I don't see any other questions or comments. This was the only information topic on tonight's agenda. I'm glad we were able to fill out and everybody got to comment and ask a lot of questions. And thank you so much, Cynthia, for entertaining all of these and taking all of our feedback in stride. All right, let's see. Let me get back to the agenda here. So I think next up would be staff reports and updates. So this we got in your agenda packet report providing project updates. So Cynthia, if you wanted to go through that report.
Yeah, and actually, prior to going through that report, I also have the Ann Arbor Crash Review Team report for this month. But I did see that Larry has his hand raised.
Oh, is that a still raised, Larry, or did you want to add something else? I think you're muted, Larry. All right, well, butt in anytime if you wanted to say anything on the last topic.
It's a still raised. I'll lower it.
Okay. All right,
I
thanks.
got automatic.
All right, back to you.
No worries. I just noticed that. And, okay. So once again, I'm going to share my screen and I am going to offer an apology that we did not get this out to you ahead of time. we were working with a couple of extra different folks, and we are streamlining this process as of right now. So what you will see in front of you is a document that reads Ann Arbor Crash Review Team Report, July 2025. As we discussed last month, this is the format that we're working with for right now for our crash review team report outs. As we discussed last month, these are the crashes that are the most severe. These will be either fatal or life-threatening injury crashes, and they are defined by the Ann Arbor Police Department in the crashes that have detailed crash investigations. So those are the crashes that we are going to be reporting out. So this location is Miller Avenue at Red Oak. Our crash summary, the UD10 number was not available at the time that we did this crash review, so I do not have that available for you at this time. This crash happened on June 16th, 2025 at 2:32 p.m. There was one party involved in this crash. This crash was a little bit different in that it occurred in a closed construction site. So the street was closed at the time. This is an area of Miller that we are reconstructing right now. And the paved surface was completely removed at the time. So it is an unpaved surface. Our weather conditions were clear and dry. Lighting conditions are daylight. So contributing factors and description for this crash is that a gravel hauler in a closed construction zone was dumping a load of gravel with the truck in a skewed position. As the dump bed elevated, the soil condition on one side of the trailer loosened and caused the trailer to tip sideways. The trailer rotated onto the truck cab, resulting in the cab being crushed. So this is more of a workplace item than it is necessarily a transportation network design type crash. But we're reporting on it. It's reported to the state. It will be part of the data set that comes out, the official data set. So we are reporting on it. As it was part of the construction zone, we do not have a key dangerous behavior to make note of as part of this particular crash. Other observational and behavioral notes are that the driver did stop the vehicle in a dangerous position. It was skewed. The vehicle was not in line. We do not have an enforcement on response for this one. We do not have an engineering response for this one. We do have an education response. So the education response here was developed with the city safety team. And the concern that we have identified is construction site safety. And the safety team identified 3 near-term responses for this crash. And that is that the city safety team, they are developing a communication that will be sent out to all of the contractors with active construction projects in the city. I do believe that at that time, that letter has actually been completed and given out to all the project managers to go ahead and forward out to their projects. Another near-term strategy that was implemented was that work was stopped after the incident. The contractor, engineering, and safety representatives reviewed the incident on site and determined what actions the contractor would take in response to the incident. And MIOSHA also conducted an incident investigation starting on the 20th. I would also like to note that we're very concerned, especially as this is the second in construction incident that has happened this summer. We are working diligently with our safety team to highlight this in any new projects that are kicking off, and our project managers are continuing to have conversations with our ongoing construction contractors as well. We will give a 90-day update that is a follow-up on this crash if there's anything to be updating on this crash, and we will also be giving a 1-year update about this crash, and that will become an ongoing practice for us as we're reporting out these from the crash review team.
Thank you. I really like this new format. I think Rachel, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that this is the second construction incident recently. That was what the first thing that came up for me as well. Really appreciate that you're going to be giving updates as well on the response. And I would just encourage you to include some specifics on like Michigan OSHA policies, perhaps that like might be relevant to this situation or the other situation. I think as we get updates, that's something I would like to understand better is yeah, how any state policies that govern these work sites could be improved or yeah, just how that factors in.
Thank you. Peter?
Thank you very much for this document. This is a really good work. Thank you for putting it together. Is it going to be attached to the agenda or the is it going to be attached with the other documents for this meeting? Is that where I can find it?
Yeah. So I'll make sure to put it under our the monthly transportation updates. So it will just
All right, great.
It'll replace the report that you guys are used to seeing.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I also want to point out that I think after this month, we're going to have the kinks in our new process worked out so that it should come out in a more timely manner next month. And once again, I do apologize about that. I will also point out that we are going to be, we'll still do the annual crash review that we have done in the past and present on sort of those citywide trends and items as well.
All right, thank you. Is there the monthly project report to go through?
Yeah, I will go ahead and just touch base on a couple of items. You have received this document. There are some things that I do want to highlight in the document. And the first is that we have received the final report for our road safety audit at Anne, Catherine, Glenn, and Zena Pitcher. And we internally as staff, so anyone who maybe is not familiar with the road safety audit process, we have a kickoff meeting and then an independent review team goes out and reviews the area and comes back with all of the safety items that they can find. And that can be anything from as minor as you need to update your crosswalk pavement markings to we're seeing people confused by signal phasing or something like that, right? Like or we're seeing this in the data set, and it's just an independent review. So we have a list of items that comes out of that, and we as staff are beginning to review it. And part of the commitment to the road safety audit process is that we provide a formal response to all of those items. So we are working through that. This will become an item that we present to you at a later date. We are also going to be working with our partners at the University of Michigan and the RIDE as we are responding to some of these items. The next thing that I really wanted to highlight is that the sidewalk gap planning project has gotten through its first round of public engagement, and we did have good participation at all of those meetings. So those are those last really high priority sidewalk gaps that are going to be a little bit more expensive and are going to require a bit more planning. But that process is going along really well. Another thing I wanted to highlight is that the Safe Streets for All grant projects are back underway again. I think we may have touched on that last month. And there is a requirement for us to update our grant agreement with the federal government. And so that's a process that we're working on. We're not anticipating any real roadblocks at this point, but I did want to make everybody aware that work is ongoing, and we do have to update this grant agreement, but everything seems to be moving forward at this point in time. Just another item to discuss is that crosswalk improvements at Beeks and North Fifth Avenue have started construction. And another big item is that the Brockman Stadium and St. Francis and Stadium signals have received their updated retiming so that there is flashing yellow arrow emit at those locations when there is a pedestrian activation. Those were the things that I wanted to point out from the project update.
Pete?
Thanks for the update on the flashing yellow arrows. I did want to follow up with that topic. In our last meeting, you had mentioned that flashing yellow arrows can be safer for car traffic, and I didn't understand that. I'm just trying to figure out what you meant by that. I've been considering that.
Yeah. So that particular implementation was developed as a way to provide more flexibility in signal timing, especially to adapt to changing needs throughout the day. And there was a lot of research that went into the development of the flashing yellow arrow, and it was found to be more informative and have better safety outcomes than just having the green balls. So that's one of the reasons that particular type of signal phasing was developed, and that has to do with, there are a lot of factors that go into that, and I will admit it's been a little while since I've totally read through that literature, but teaser, we are working towards having a presentation about signal timing and signal design this fall that can really go into depth on some of these items.
Okay. We were talking about it in the context last month of Division and Huron, and my experience as a driver at that location is that the flashing yellow arrow does like people end up taking risks. There's so much westbound traffic that like it's rare to find an opportunity to sneak through during the flashing yellow arrow phase. And so people take risks that they shouldn't. To me, it seems like that would be safer if that signal went from a red arrow for left turners to a green arrow for left turners with no flashing yellow in the interim. Also related to that, where are we on the progress with getting MDOT to agree to a change there? As I recall, you're going to bring that up with them in June.
And we did bring that up with them in June. And we will continue to express this body's interest in that when we meet with them. But I can't speak to what their process might look like.
Okay, all right.
Eric?
Yeah, I was over by the Central Campus Transit Center recently, and I saw that they were doing some work there. And I remember back to our conversation last month about the North U project coming up, and I went back to look and see what the heck was going on. And I couldn't quite see it in the slides from last month. Is there plans to put like a signalized pedestrian crossing there at where like North U changes to Getty's? Or is that going to kind of remain the same?
The work at the CCTC and that crosswalk that is near adjacent to this CCTC is a different project than the work that is going on over at North U. They are signalizing that crosswalk, and that is a project that has been in the works for a while.
I love it. There's so many pedestrians there, and I don't know. I don't love that. And then the other question I had, I was looking recently online to see what the guidelines were for traffic calming, and I know that we're coming up towards the end of a process for traffic calming. Is it still the case? The stuff online says that they have to get like community approval for the final design. Is that still the case, or is it no longer the case that we have to get like a specific number to approve it of neighbors in the area?
So you're right, we are working on this process of updating speed management and neighborhood traffic calming. And we kind of refer that as capital T, capital C traffic calming, which is under the umbrella of speed management. I understand that it can be confusing at times, but as far as like process and implementation, that's kind of how we see it. But the neighborhood traffic calming process as a petition process that is it's not as data driven as like when we're implementing speed management as part of a capital project. So traffic calming can proceed even when you have speeds that are below the speed limit. Right. So you can have I can think of times where we've had like an 85th percentile speed of 23 and traffic calming proceeded through. So that traffic calming process, we have not fully revised it to date. So that's part of what we're working through with the subcommittee. And but it is still a petition process. So it is more petition based and not as data driven. It will currently still requires that approval process, and we will be when we meet with the subcommittee next, we'll be looking at what some alternatives for that can be as we're moving forward.
Yeah, for some reason I thought that went away like last year or something. I thought there was something the city council put through as a resolution saying like these neighborhood traffic calming, it requires neighborhoods to initiate them, and it requires their participation to decide on a final design, but it does not require neighborhood approval to place something.
Nor will it need to go to council in the future. We're in this unfortunate position where we don't have all of that work done to have a new program to be able to advertise and to be able to be working under. And there are just a lot of factors that have gone into us being where we are in that process. But we are working towards a more streamlined process that will be both a little bit easier on residents and shift some of our our current resource expenditure from this sort of managing this process to being able to spend more on implementation and getting more done. And yeah, to really streamline it. We're working towards it.
All right, Pete, do you have something?
Yeah, so we're adding a signal in this mid-block crossing that is basically between the dental school building and the chemistry building. Is that what I'm understanding correctly?
It's right there next to the CCTC across Northview. The university
West of the CCTV.
Yeah, just west. And the university is installing a signalized intersection.
So is that, I thought that was our street. They're installing. Where can we get some details on what this is going to include?
I can have staff be available, or we can bring in the university's team to present that to you if that's something that you're interested in. I have not been as intimately involved with that particular project, so I unfortunately don't have those details to give you this evening.
Okay, but that is our street though, right? That's a city street. That's not a university-owned street.
That is correct. It is under our jurisdiction.
Okay, I guess if we have a situation where pedestrians need to wait for a signal to change there, that seems like a very bad idea at that crossing. I guess I would like to know more about it. Thank you.
Yeah, it sounds like the work's already in progress, but if it's would be at all useful to have an engineer or somebody come and talk about that, then I think that'd be a good idea. Dharma.
I just wanted to speak quickly to Eric's question and appreciate Cynthia's response that, we're updating the documentation and the subcommittee is still meeting, but it definitely is the case that they no longer need the approval of council. And I do know that the intent of the working group that created that was to create a situation, even by petition, if so much has been invested in determining that there is a problem and that enough people signed a petition to address it, the end shouldn't be nothing happening. So I can appreciate it's a transition and everything, but I guess I just wanted to quickly speak to the intent of where we want to wind up. So that's it.
Where we're headed is once the petition has enough signatures of the addresses, then it's going forward. There's no veto point at anywhere after that where it could be vetoed. There's no more surveys after that. So that's where we're headed, Eric. All right. Okay. Any liaison reports from commissioners who serve as liaison to another body or organization? Nothing, seeing none. All right, I'll put out our monthly call for agenda items. If you have any ideas ever, as always, please email or contact us in any other way. Dharma.
Sorry, I don't know if I count as a liaison, but I did want to report out an item from City Council. We just, I think today or yesterday, we got our bike lane obstruction report from the Chief of Police, and it's going to be attached to City Council's next agenda, which is Monday, the 21st. So you should see it there.
Great. Yeah, I think we even discussed maybe attaching it to our agenda monthly as well.
Yeah, it might not have come out in time. Like I said, I think it landed.
Well, yeah, this month I understand. Yeah, but like in the future, yeah,
good to know. Okay.
This is about enforcement and that kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah, where they're seeing the most violations and the enforcement and A2 fix it. And I haven't really looked yet in detail. It's quite a bit in there.
Yeah, it seems like that would be at least, quarterly or something for us to be made aware of it as well.
Yeah, it's being made quarterly. So, yep.
Perfect. Thank you. Chris.
Yeah, so before we conclude tonight's meeting, I just wanted to take a moment to introduce Ariana Lepine. She'll be stepping in as the new staff liaison for the Transportation Commission. So I would just like to extend a warm welcome to Ariana. She brings a great deal of insight and energy to the role, and I have full confidence I'm leaving you guys in very capable hands. So
Thank you. Thank you very much for your work over the years, Christopher and Ariana. It's great to meet you. Good to see you at the meeting here, and look forward to working with you. I suppose I'll see you next at our agenda setting meeting here in a few weeks. So thanks for volunteering to deal with us. We definitely need the help. So all right. All right. Well, with that, another goodbye to Christopher. Is this your last meeting then, assuming?
yes, yes, it is.
Well, thanks again for years of work, and I hope to still see you around, and good luck with your new position, your new role.
Thank you.
All right. Well, the next meeting will be held. Pull my calendar. So, August 20th, 2025 at 7 p.m. It will also be a virtual meeting. So if there are no objections, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Have a good night.